The Ford Model A made automotive history. You can make automotive history as well by becoming a subscriber to the Audrain Museum Network today. You'll see me and other members of the Audrain team driving an incredible range of cars, like this Model A, to a modern supercar. You can only find that here. Do it right now. Thanks. Everyone who knows anything about cars is familiar with the Ford Model T. But as much as I like and admire and appreciate the historical importance of the Model T, my favorite early Ford, well, I can't say my favorite early Ford because I have had the privilege and the honor of driving the Audrain Collection's wonderful 1907 Ford Model S. And that's a pretty special piece of kit. But the car I'm driving right now is one of my favorite Fords, a 1930 Ford Model A. What Henry Ford accomplished with his cars, the Model T being the most obvious example of literally putting millions of people on the road behind the wheel for the first time, people who never imagined that they'd ever own or drive a car, was really continued with the Model A. A lot is made of the fact that, yes, Henry Ford stuck to the Model T far too long, didn't listen to his son Edsel, didn't listen to a lot of other advisors that said he needed to move along with the market. But when the Model A came out, and it's also quite interesting that they actually reused the letter A, even though of course they were up to T by the time that model went out in production in 1927. But in so many ways, this was a restart for the company. So A, I think, was a very fitting and appropriate name for the car. First and foremost, for anybody who has the opportunity and privilege to drive a Model A, the first thing you'll notice is that after the T, with its somewhat idiosyncratic control pedals and operation, the Model A drives just like any other car. Traditional arrangement of clutch, brake, and throttle button rather than pedal. And you're off and running. The Model A also is a great exemplar of something that Ford, and particularly Henry Ford, is very good at doing, which is moving a car further up market than you might believe it to be. The Model T literally changed the car from being a toy of the wealthy to something that everyday people could not only aspire to, but actually own and use, a practical tool. And the Model A took that to the next step because it did it with not only practicality, but with, I think, more than a bit of style. I'm a big fan of veteran cars and also utility cars of the 30s. I happen to own a 1935 Fiat 508 Balilla with a very special body by Carrozzeria Bertone, designed by Mario Ravelli di Beaumont. But I love the Model A's because the Model A in its standard factory form, and by the way, in I think the most attractive model, this one, the Roadster, which was the least expensive in the line. Back in the day, of course, a convertible always cost less than a hardtop because, of course, it was cheaper to make, but until convertibles began to become a fashion item and began to command a premium, which I'm sure back in 1930 no one could imagine, but nevertheless, this is a car with great style. If you look at other cars of the 1930s and you realize that this is an entry-level car. It's got amazing style, just the form. And it's the reason why this car has always been such a favorite with the hot rodders. And one of the reasons why it's really great to find original spec cars like this one today. And this is another car that we're celebrating which has been a donation to the Audrain Automobile Museum by a very generous donation by a woman named Annette Pelletier. The Audrain Automobile Museum has a mission to preserve, celebrate, and share automotive history. We've been doing it for 10 years now, since October 2014. If you want to help us continue this great mission, do what Annette Pelletier did and make a donation of a car to the Audrain Automobile Museum. This great Ford Model A is going to help the Audrain to continue to spread our mission and to share the joy of old cars with everybody we can find. Help us now. Make a donation. Thanks. Annette's husband, Brian, collected and restored Jeeps and Ford Model A's. They were a great passion of his, and the quality of the work that he did is so evident in this car. This car was restored many, many years ago, and the quality of the restoration is just outstanding. It's held up really well, and today really presents like a well-used and well-loved example of a Model A, perhaps when it was 10 or so years old. These cars just also, again, are one of those things that just sort of take us back to a place and a time. By today's standards, are they fast? Absolutely not. But you have no trouble at all driving on modern roads with traffic in a Model A. You feel secure. A fellow I know once used his Model A as daily transportation for a year, and it's an amazing thing to read his accounts of what it was like to do that. When you realize that there's such practicality still today in the 21st century with a car like this. These cars even were available with a heater device that took heat from the engine exhaust manifold and could send it into the cabin. So you could actually have in-car heating in a 1930 car. And the reception for this car was amazing. It's one of the reasons why these cars are so incredibly popular even today, because they made such an incredible impression on society. Cars introduced in late 1927 as a 1928 model. By the spring of the following year, they had already sold 2 million of these Model A's, and by the time the car was phased out a year later, they had sold over 3 million. An astonishing accomplishment for a car. And you realize, of course, that while this did certainly help to popularize the car, cars were still fairly expensive as they go for household acquisitions. Shifting of the car is good. The brakes are really quite outstanding. And you know why these cars are so enjoyed by their owners. They love to take them out for drives and tours. Even on a winter day like today, it's great being in this car. To be able to share Brian Pelletier's passion for these cars with all the members of the Audrain family here in Rhode Island and across the country and around the world on this YouTube channel is really quite wonderful. And it's a great example of how, if you have a car that's really been particularly loved and you're not sure what you want to do with it, do think about making a donation to the Audrain, because whether it's a great collection car like this or an everyday car that you no longer have a use for, but you think that can be sold to help the mission of the Audrain to preserve, celebrate, and share automotive history, we'd appreciate it. And I'll tell you, there's no more joyous way of celebrating automotive history than driving this Model A. And it's also another great example of the range in the collector car world. You don't have to be a millionaire to enjoy a collector car. Model A's like this are very modestly priced, and for the enjoyment and thrill and motoring adventure they offer, I think they're absolutely fantastic. The popularity of these was absolutely amazing. Introduced in October 1927 as a 1928 model, by the spring of 29, they had already sold 2 million. By the middle of the year, 3 million, and before production ended and this car was superseded, 5 million Model A's had been sold. An absolutely amazing accomplishment. And the fact that in this body, they later went on to introduce the first popular priced V8 car is absolutely amazing, the Model 18. And even without the V8, this L-head inline 4 produces 40 horsepower, which is plenty. Even here in top gear, the car still has really good grunt. Don't hear people generally use the word grunt when referring to a Model A, but it does really go. So if you're looking for a really fun, reasonable way to get into truly historic motoring, you could do a lot worse than to find a Ford Model A. And this is just such a thrill. And this Model A Roadster is everything I always imagined it to be. It's fantastic. I love it.